absolutely wonderful to be here today. Actually, when I was thinking of what to call my presentation, I was thinking actually in the terms of a tale of two cities, and it'll become immediately apparent why that's the case. You're all wondering, why is the big 91 up on the screen? And just to sort of to grab you a little bit, because there are 91 days until the last car rolls off the assembly line at the Holden plant in Elizabeth, South Australia, just so that everyone knows. The car industry has been in Australia for 100 years and has been concentrated in the metropolitan areas of Melbourne and Adelaide. In 91 days, not only will this facility close, but the entire industry will have shut down, displacing thousands of workers in assembly plants and their entire supply chain. So, thinking about the title of our conference, these people are clearly looking for new directions in an uncertain world. But this is clearly a Melbourne and Adelaide problem. I grew up in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, a city much like Geelong or Elizabeth, and I saw this firsthand with the collapse of the steel industry that was located there. And this steel industry fed into the Detroit car industry. I moved to Germany and was professor at the city of Bochum, which also closed their General Motors assembly operations. Finally, I moved to Australia, and here we are again. Geelong, Altona, Broadmeadows, Elizabeth. Some might say that the government should confiscate my passport just so that this path of destruction can finally be stopped. But seriously, the presentation is about the industry cluster surrounding the automotive industry, the employees being affected, and some of the possible solutions going forward for these industry centers in the cities. So this presentation is not intended to be a depressing story. This is intended to be a story of rebirth. And if we do this right, I believe Australia is well positioned to come out ahead. So what we're basically dealing with is, how do we replace an industry that's been in these two main industrial cluster cities for 100 years? How can we replace that and match up with the kinds of profiles that we've seen already? Where to from here? Well, clearly the auto industry has been in trouble for quite some time. So for the last 45 years, production in the auto industry has been in decline. And that's even with a highly productive labor force producing at even a very low cost, 92% of the comparable US worker. The problem is, of course, is that Australia is just simply geographically located far away. And even if we think about how Australia is slowly inching its way over to Asia, it will take some time before these costs of transport costs will become non-negligible. So it's clearly an area of decline. If we look at the top three car producers, Toyota, Holden, and Ford, what we immediately see is that the closure will occur by the end of this year, in fact in October. And we're looking at displacing something like 7,000 employees in a very concentrated area, in the areas of metropolitan Melbourne and metropolitan Adelaide. So this is a city problem. This is a serious city problem. But not only is it the primary industry, but of course it's the entire supply chain. So the primary area, the supply chain, of course what we can expect are multiplier effects, and these are all concentrated in very, very small geographical areas. In fact, some of these supply chain providers can be as little as 300 meters away from the primary provider. So Lance Worrell and John Spohr tabled a report that basically showed that Australia was looking at the loss of something like 200,000 jobs net with the demise of the auto industry. And of course that has large ramifications for the growth potential of Victoria and South Australia. And in fact, a lot of this stunting of growth is of course concentrated in areas that are very, very already sort of not so well off with respect to their industrial profile to begin with. So, having spent most of my academic life in Germany, you get to sort of dealing with the issue of unemployment. And when I first came to Australia, people suggested I change my research agenda, because I was told, actually, there isn't any unemployment here in Australia, and so that's a pretty much a pointless research agenda to have. Well, it's come back again, and so a lot of the knowledge that we have about unemployment and entry into unemployment, for instance, some work that I've done together with my co-author Sonia Kassenberger, shows that it's very negative to people's self-esteem, very negative to people's subjective well-being, and this is what's going to happen to these areas in Melbourne and Adelaide. I got some wonderful information from the Holden Company about a survey of their current auto workers, and leading up to the time that they will be displaced in the after Holden world. And I got some really interesting descriptive statistics from them. So these people have worked, of course, almost all their lives, and of course they want to continue working all their lives and working full time. Their education is predominantly, of course, high school, but they have lots of levels of certification. So these are employable people, these are skilled people. Not only do they have these skills, but of course they would love to be able to continue using their skills. And they're very open to the idea of expanding those skills into the IT area. So these are employable and wanting to sort of expand their skills. So I thought I needed to take a closer look at that. And so I got data from the Melbourne Institute's own HILDA panel, the Household Income, Labour and Dynamics of Australia panel. And I looked at what are happening, or what's actually happening to the people in this industry over the last 15 years. So I got information from 2001 to 2015, both men and women, and I combined the industries of mining, manufacturing, and construction because I thought they would be very similar in profile, and looked at what's happening with employment, entry into unemployment, and re-entry into employment. Three things that came out of that mini study. So of the people who are currently not working, of those who have just entered into unemployment, I was looking at what's the probability that the last person's job was in this sort of particularly interesting industry of mining, manufacturing, construction. And they're pretty much the same as any other industry. So they're not more likely to enter into unemployment than any other industry. And for instance, given that a person was in mining, manufacturing, and construction, in other words, that might fit into the auto worker area, what's the probability that the person is employed this period? It's only 0.2 of 1 percentage point lower. It's statistically significantly lower, but economically insignificantly lower. And then I want to know is, suppose that you were in this industry and you lost your job, what was the probability that you could re-enter that industry? Well, it was about half the people could re-enter that industry. But now with the demise of the auto industry in these two cities, of course, that probability is going to be much lower. So that's why I think policymakers really need to be active in this space, is that under normal conditions, people in this industry do well, but these are not normal times. Things are changing. So I thought I'd have a look and go visit the plant in Elizabeth, South Australia. And I was really happy to see that there were a lot of programs that the car company were offering, allowing people to gain the skills, either to go into business for themselves, gain additional IT skills, things along that line. But how do we make that sort of transition the best in these sort of two localized economies? Well, let's start thinking a little bit big. Let's just start thinking a little bit bigger than what we normally think. And let's start thinking about a growth industry that I'm going to call smarter energy. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you some examples that are actually in action right now in Canada. And so I think Australia can learn from some of these Canadian examples. If you start to look at Australia's place in the world with respect to energy consumption, what you can see is that we use twice as much coal as the OECD average, and far fewer renewables as compared to the OECD average. When you start to look at our greenhouse emissions, double that of the OECD average. And we're using energy on average much more than the OECD countries in general. And then when you start to look at how do we generate our electricity that we use for everyday life, you can actually find this up to the minute exact online. You can see for any state the sort of the energy mix, the energy source mix that's being used. What we're using is tons and tons and tons of black coal, and here in Victoria, unfortunately, brown coal, which is of course the dirtiest of them all. So the thing is that our energy use is something that of course needs to be addressed, and not just the amount, but then the mix. If you start to look at the price of coal, for instance, look at the volatility with respect to the price of coal. It can even increase its price by a factor of 10. And this is, of course, the engine of electricity production here in Australia. But this is the kind of volatility that we're exposed to. If you look at the volatility in the price of natural gas, it's very similar. What you see is, of course, across the board, the price of producing solar-based energy is consistently dropping and dropping in a very predictable manner. This is particularly interesting, and I'll show you in a minute, to the cities of Melbourne and Adelaide. I had a look at the national energy market. It's the biggest energy market in the world if you start to look at the distance in the power lines. And for most households, they're making their energy consumption decisions based on maybe 1 or 2 price points. In other words, peak or off-peak. But in the wholesale market, what we're looking at is a whole bunch of 5-minute spot markets where price can fluctuate dramatically. As we all know, what's happened in the last year, a heat wave, say in the city of Sydney, can spike the prices dramatically. Can go from something like $100 per megawatt hour to $12,000 per megawatt hour, and we have to be able to somehow incorporate these costs. If you start to look at, for instance, the energy market in Victoria, what you can see is the green line. You can see a very nice, smooth, easily predictable demand. But what, of course, you see also is the highly volatile wholesale price. And these are in 5-minute spot markets. Same thing that we can see for South Australia. This is a Melbourne, this is an Adelaide issue. Let's find how we can look at ways in which we can implement this new smarter energy industry that will allow us the growth industry that we once had, say with the automobile industry, allow us to regain some of these jobs. And of course, at the same time, we get some clean air, we get investments in education and human capital and know-how in this industry. This is happening right now in real time. Let's have a look at Toronto. This is actually happening in real time, in which this industry is growing such that what we're doing is, here in Toronto, what we're doing is we're putting lithium-ion batteries up telephone poles. And in the evening, when there's excess supply of electricity, we're siphoning it off, we're storing it in these batteries, and then integrating them into the supply for the next day. This is happening in real time right now in Toronto. The same thing can happen with 0.5 megawatt racks, where you just sort of decentralize, place all these things in the city. Well, what does that have to do with Melbourne and Adelaide? We could be doing exactly the same thing. The same kinds of people the same kind of profile sets of skill sets of what people could be doing or were doing in the automobile industry. These are the same kinds of skill sets that these people could be doing in this new industry of smarter energy, servicing these racks of lithium-ion batteries and providing this additional supply to the grid. I saw this firsthand in Toronto. In fact, the people who were working on these sites were people who were directly out of the GM auto industry in Toronto that had been previously laid off. So the skill set is right. The skill set I know is right, and these are development possibilities that we can be taking advantage of. So what are the next steps? Well, of course, there's been a lot of movement in the coal industry. There's been all this sort of development in high efficiency, low emission coal, carbon capture, and that's ways of course, addressing our energy issues. But that's clearly not enough. And so what we need to do to get this industry going is to be clustering our know-how. And clustering our know-how in these areas of competence in Melbourne and Adelaide. And one way in which we can do that is by fostering the use of lithium-ion storage. So what we really need to make sure that this industry survives is we need to build a consortium. We need to build a consortium of interested parties. That includes international car companies, mining companies, areas of research such as the universities, CSIRO and the ARC, and state and commonwealth government. Why would a mining company be interested in investing in this? These big five mining companies, of course, should be interested. It should be in their own interest, because at some point, coal is just simply going to be a far too dirty an energy source to be using. So we need to be moving into this area, making these investments, and replacing the old industries that we've had in Melbourne and South Australia. I'm not sure if everyone's aware of what's going on. Tesla is building the new gigafactory in Nevada to produce lithium-ion batteries on a scale that has never been seen before in this entire world. In fact, this production facility will add to the total global production of lithium-ion batteries by factors of 2, 3, and maybe more. And so, what does this mean? It means that the price of storage of electricity has gone so far down that we can actually begin to use this electrical storage as a key factor in this new smarter energy industry. We all heard this month, in fact, of the new announcement of the facility that's being established in Jamestown, South Australia, north of Adelaide. A combination of lithium-ion batteries to store electricity coupled with wind energy to generate that electricity. These are possibilities for investments in know-how, investments in this industry, jobs and growth. In fact, this week what we found was the Victorian government announcing a similar kind of a setup with solar energy and lithium-ion battery storage to power up all the trams in Melbourne. Similar kinds of investments being made in Bendigo. And even what we heard most fantastic was actually just this week is a new production facility in Dandenong in Greater Melbourne, which looked at the production of electric trucks. This is just happening just this week. This is incredibly exciting as to these new developments. But this clearly won't be enough just to allow these few small developments to happen. What the Prime Minister, for instance, in his lunchtime talked about these carbon rims that are being made in Geelong. That's a great development, but that certainly won't be enough, and that's something that we'll have to be addressing, fostering, and adding to that industry. Let's face it, Australia is the sunniest place on Earth. There's no two ways about it. And if we can't make solar energy work here in Melbourne or in Adelaide, we can't make it work anywhere in the world. And certainly anywhere further north, there's just such an abundance of sunshine. All of this work, of course, is prefaced on the ability to translate sunshine into some sort of electrical energy. And all of this work is being done, for instance, at the Centre of Excellence Hub in Exaton Science. Here at the University of Melbourne, also Monash University, we're looking at new materials to efficiently translate the sun's energy into electricity. This is happening here in these two cities, the tale of two cities. So what I'm looking at is a win-win situation of investing in Melbourne and Adelaide, keeping the employment up where we had before, keeping the know-how and the jobs here, and making sure that, of course, we're addressing our national clean energy targets, making sure that our greenhouse gases are reduced, and certainly getting much, much cleaner air. And of course, what do we gain from this? Actually, a much more stable energy supply, much more abundance of energy, and all of this is, of course, completely compatible with the Finkel review. So what do we gain? Well, we get zero emissions from all of the lithium-ion batteries that we use. We get zero emissions from all the solar and wind energy that we use. We get zero emissions from all these electrical cars. And of course, for our grid stability, we get zero response time for for electricity supply. We can react very dynamically for that. And let's just face it, petrol cars and diesel cars are on their way out. We have zero time to waste. In fact, what we need to do on all levels of government and all levels of industry, we need to be acting now. Thank you very much.